If you're a skier or a snowboarder, or you just like the cold, this hasn't been a great winter for you so far in these parts. December was unusually mild, and we haven't had a lot of snow after last year's record amounts, especially in the Boston area. How can you explain it? Well, Connecting Point correspondent Carolee McGrath sat down with 22 News chief meteorologist Brian Lapis and University of Massachusetts climatologist Professor Michael Rawlins to discuss the El Nino effect on our weather and how the world's climate patterns change constantly as time goes by.
This phenomenon El Nino is for real, and this year is an exceptionally warm El Nino, this warming of waters in the eastern Pacific. And clearly it's played a role in our weather in that it has been warm, and actually December was kind of on the wet side, and not subtly warm. Oftentimes when we talk about, warming, how in the big picture it's very subtle. Where December, we were knocking records out of the park, at least a few days in December where we were blowing records away by 5, 10, even 20 degrees in some instances. So it was an exceptionally warm winter with not only warm high temperatures, but temperatures that didn't get very cold at night either. Right. So it was mild across the board.
But is that to be expected with an El Nino winter? When was the last time it was that warm with El Nino in play?
The last time we had an exceptionally warm El Nino was 1997. And actually I was doing some research for a school group that I was talking to about El Nino. And apparently, given the historical record, when we have an El Nino event, we tend to be in the 30% warmest winters on record for this region in Massachusetts. So there is a correlation between what's happening in the Pacific to what's happening in New England. It's amazing how weather is connected that way globally. What happens, across the continent can have an effect on our weather here.
And Michael, I know that NASA just released a big report about how warm the winter was globally. If you could explain that for us.
Yeah, yesterday NASA and NOAA announced that the year 2015 annually was globally warmest on record. We know the climate's warming. 15 of the past 16 warmest years have been this century. So they jointly announced yesterday that when you average over the globe, 2015 was the warmest on record. Now, not in this area because we started off the year very, very cold. January through March was some of the coldest weather we've seen in many, many years around here, record-breaking. And so for the year in this region, we were above average warm, but not record warm. But when you look over the globe, clearly very, very warm, and that's a result of humans burning fossil fuels, increasing greenhouse gas concentrations, and that's something we'll see moving forward.
And so when a skeptic comes up to you and says, listen, but we were slammed with snow last year, how could you possibly say that there's global warming? What's your answer to that?
Well, there's weather and there's climate. So weather is what we see over short periods of time. It's the instantaneous state of the atmosphere, Brian could tell you, at any one given moment. You could have a cold snowstorm, a cold few months, and still have a warming climate. That's just weather variations. The weather, some people call it chaos. So we will have to distinguish between weather and climate. We think about climate, what's the climate of the desert southwest of the U.S.? We think warm and dry. Maybe the United Kingdom up in Western Europe, we think cool and wet. So you can still have these cold record-breaking temperatures in any given day or week, cold weather, but that can't discount the fact that you've got climate warming over many decades, 20, 30, 50 years, 100 years, you look back, you see the climate's warming, and that's very predictable based on the greenhouse gas concentration increases we've seen over the last several decades.
So with El Nino, what does the rest of the winter look like? Is there any sort of pattern? I know we've gotten cold weather, I know snow will come and go, but is there any sort of pattern?
Well, I would say that given the historical record that when we have these exceptional El Ninos, we tend to be warm, I would expect that we would still be warmer than average considering the season. And keep in mind that we're here getting close to the end of January now, so the water's under the bridge. The snow is, it's not, we could have a snowy February. And one of the things that Michael has pointed out in some of the the research that we've read is that with a warming climate, if we have ocean water that's warming, you get these differences between cold air and warm ocean water, and it becomes that creates some instability, and we could actually end up with some big snowstorms here, despite the fact that we've had a relatively warm winter. But considering the fact that the trend has been warming, I would expect that we would stay a bit above average here as we head into the end of winter.
Okay, as you know, some scientists don't agree with the consensus, or what people will call the consensus, on climate change. How do you respond to that?
Well, the data clearly show that the climate's warming. No longer can anybody say that the climate's not warming. The warming hiatus that we've heard about, that was a myth. Clearly the climate's warming. And now the role of humans, yes, climate has varied over long periods of time. We go back hundreds of thousands of years. We have ice ages. Those are the result of the way the Earth orbits around the sun. Slight changes in the way the Earth's tilt, how we circle around the sun, can cause long, very, very slow changes, ice ages over many, many years. The warming we've seen over the last 150, 200 years is clearly a result of our human activities. That's predicted by models. That was predicted by scientists over 100 years ago. So I would respond by saying, look at the data, climate's warming. We understand how the climate system works. We know that human activities are playing a role, and now we have to start to address this problem before it gets really, really too bad.
But how do you explain, like, random dates? And I'll give you one. 1889, this came from, I think, AccuWeather, December 13th, 71 degrees in Washington, D.C. That's warm. You would think, you know, back in the 1800s, everybody would be freezing during that time. Like, how do you explain these random dates where you had these warm spells?
Well, I don't think anybody's discounting natural variability. I think that's one of the things that, unfortunately, we in the TV business and in the weather communication business aren't doing a good enough job with, is communicating the fact that there will be occasionally some very cold winters, and there will be occasionally some exceptionally warm winters,
right.
You know. But in the middle here is what we're seeing is a shortening of the winter season, and we're seeing this climate record that shows consistent warming just about everywhere.
Yeah. I might add that if we look at the number of record high temperatures broken versus the record cold,
right,
the ratio is 2 to 1 in recent years. Last year, in December, it was like 20 to 1. So that changing ratio, where you have more warm records broken than cold records, that's a clear sign that the climate's not stationary, that the climate's changing. So you will have cold records broken occasionally. Yes, cold days, cold weeks, cold months. But you're having more warm days, record warm days, than record cold days, and that's a clear sign that the climate's not stationary, that it's changing.
Okay, so to guarantee a white Christmas for 2016, we have a running start. What do we have to do?
Well,
or that I could fill up my hockey rink before the end of this winter. That's the big disappointment in my family.
Well, we probably need to move somewhere else.
Okay, that sounds good. Michael and Brian, thank you so much for joining us, and very interesting topic this morning. Thank you.